The Super Bowl is over. The Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes did it again. I'm wearing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers sweater to shout out the only time, probably, that Mahomes will ever be beaten in the Super Bowl. But today we're going to be tackling a first-round NFL mock draft now that we have the official draft order going through all the team needs and some of the picks. And, of course, as a fantasy channel, if you guys are new around here, we are probably going to primarily focus on the fantasy players that go in this mock draft. But thankfully, in the 2024 draft cycle, that is going to be a lot of them because of the quarterbacks, the wide receivers, and some of the tight end prospects here. So I'm excited to get into this one. We're going to do the full first round mock. Danny, how you doing?
Doing well, doing well. And yeah, finally, if you're a fan of the Chiefs or the 49ers, you get to embrace what the other 30 teams have been doing these last couple months. And that's been grinding the mock drafts, seeing what your team's projected at, kind of plotting out their plan. We're going to be tackling it from all 32 teams' perspective now that we have this finalized order. But with that being said, as always, let's waste no time and let's get right into it.
All right, so we are now into the mock draft. Again, if you skip the intro, I'm going to be controlling the odd teams. Danny's going to be controlling the even teams. We're going to try and go through this as quickly as we can so we're not keeping everybody around too much. There's been a lot of buzz about the first overall pick, especially with, all the, analysts and all the reporters all in, Las Vegas for the Super Bowl. We heard a lot of news come out about the draft. And to me, it sounds like the Bears are going to take Caleb Williams because they've been reported as saying they're going to need a historical offer to move off of the first overall pick. It sounds like the Commanders are interested in moving up to number one, but I think if the offer was reasonable or whatever, and the Bears were intent on keeping Justin Fields, a trade like that might have been already, happened, or maybe we'd hear a lot more buzz about that. So for me, the thing that I keep coming back to is if the Bears don't want to move off of first overall, it's because they want to take Caleb Williams, not Marvin Harrison or whatever other player that they'd be interested in. It sounds like to me they're getting ready to move off of Justin Fields. So I'm going to go ahead and make the pick of Caleb Williams here at first overall to the Chicago Bears. He's going to go to Chicago and he's going to, be sent off, and we'll probably do a Justin Fields trade at some point in this draft just for fun.
Yeah, I mean, so basically, because it's plotted out right now, let's plot out the Justin Fields trade. So we will take Caleb at 101. Let's look at some potential fits for Justin Fields to potentially go to here. I mean, right off the bat, I really think the New England Patriots at 3 make a ton of sense based off some reports we've been hearing. So you want to plot one out with the Patriots going after Justin Fields in this scenario?
Let's do the draft first, and maybe do it for the team once the board comes up, because I actually think it's possible that Justin Fields actually stays on the roster until Caleb is actually officially drafted. It's possible that they don't send away Justin Fields to another team, because it sounds like, in another report that we got from NFL teams and from these reporters, is that there is teams interested in moving up for quarterbacks, and is teams, potentially we're going to push up JJ McCarthy and Bo Nix and all these other type of guys. So I think it's possible that Justin Fields isn't actually dealt until after these teams know if they got a quarterback or not, and he might be their fallback option. So a lot of possibilities, a lot of permutations we could go through with this whole quarterback carousel. There's obviously other quarterbacks available in free agency too, like Kirk Cousins and Russell Wilson and Jimmy Garoppolo and Ryan Tannehill and all these guys. So there's going to be a big time musical chairs that we have to kind of stamp our predictions on right now. But for now, I'm going to just say that I'm going to go under the impression that Caleb Williams is drafted to the Bears. Maybe the Bears have traded Justin Fields already. Maybe they haven't. I tend to think that they might keep him until they actually make the selection.
Yeah, I have no problem with that. Just kind of waiting it out. I feel like that could be a similar case. I think when the Cardinals took Kyler Murray, it was a similar case where they drafted Kyler Murray. People for hours were like, oh, what are they going to do with Josh Rosen? What are they going to do with Josh Rosen? End up trading him to Miami, I believe, later that day or the next day. So definitely not an unprecedented situation when it comes to Justin Fields in terms of the handling of the previous regime quarterback. So taking Caleb, figuring out what you're going to do with Justin Fields after the fact, not a bad plan. But now I'm at number 2 here, and this is a predictive mock draft. This is not what we would do. We've been hearing some reports from Lance Zierlein, other analysts, that apparently there's some buzz that Drake may fall a few spots. And the only way I can envision that happening is if Washington knows Caleb is going 101 and prefer Jayden Daniels to Drake May. So again, not what I would do. I comfortably have Drake May ahead of Jayden Daniels in my own analysis, but let's spice it up. Let's give Jayden Daniels to the old Washington Commanders, because this is just something they would do, to be honest.
Yeah, I totally think that this is possible. I think as a Cowboys fan, you would hope that they would do this as well. You don't have to deal with Drake May in your division for the next couple of years. Yeah, I wouldn't do this. I think this is a huge mistake if they did this, but I think it's definitely possible that they will do it. So I don't disagree with the take that, some of the buzz we're hearing and some of the analysis that's going down. I could 100% see them doing this. Another piece of analysis that we're hearing is that the Patriots might skip quarterback altogether. And I think this is actually the right move for the New England Patriots because their team is nowhere close to actually competing for a Super Bowl, actually competing in their division. So, what I believe they will do is take the best player in this draft, which is Marvin Harrison Jr. You have no talent around whoever your future quarterback is. Maybe you sign a bridge quarterback, go back, with Jimmy Garoppolo because he has familiarity with the franchise, or you sign Ryan Tannehill, or maybe you make a splash for a Kirk Cousins or a Justin Fields later on. But to be honest, I think Marvin Harrison actually makes a lot of sense just in general. They played so many battles against the Indianapolis Colts. They know what Marvin Harrison Sr. meant to that Colts team. I could see the higher ups, Robert Kraft and all these guys just trumping, being like, we're not ready for a quarterback. We're going to rebuild this roster, rebuild the offensive line, rebuild the defensive line, the secondary, whatever. We're going to take the best player in this draft.
Yeah, the only criticism I would have here is that if it came at the expense of passing on Drake May, like if Drake May goes number 2 overall and they passed on Jayden Daniels to make this play, absolutely. Like you said, Marvin Harrison Jr., you can make the case for being the best overall player in this class. We both evaluated him as a generational prospect, being very, very high in our grades. So absolutely no problem there with Marvin Harrison. Like you said, a lot of familiarity there with the Patriots going after old Marvin Harrison Sr. So I don't mind just cooping Jr. on that squad for the foreseeable future. And whether they trade for a Justin Fields, whether they sign a Kirk Cousins, whatever type of move they end up making, having a solidified number 1 wide receiver on this team is definitely going to be beneficial. So I'm on the clock here. We mentioned that you got the odds, I got the evens. There is one particular trade that I am very well entertaining right now for a trade up. And it just so happens that it's between 2 even numbered teams. So we talked about this on the pre-show that this would potentially be the plan, but I think the move here, Cardinals, Marvin Harrison off the board, people would be saying, oh, well, this is a panic scenario for the Cardinals, man. They lost their number 1 wide receiver. What would they do? Well, guess what? They trade down to number 8 overall. The Atlanta Falcons are begging for a quarterback play, especially with Zach Robinson there, especially with Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, a good offensive line. You really need a centerpiece quarterback to take that offense to the next level. And to be honest, if they add Drake May to this team, I could really envision them being a scary playoff team for the foreseeable future. So I will have the Atlanta Falcons trading up. Let's say it costs 874 2025 future 1 to move up 4 spots, and they end up selecting the chosen one himself, Drake May.
Yeah, I mean, I could see Drake May even sliding more than this. Like, I could
Sure.
see every NFL team, just for whatever reason, preferring Caleb Williams. And then, Jayden Daniels has the experience. He has, obviously the Heisman Trophy season this year. Drake May had a down productive season. I think the NFL sometimes can be way too reactive and not look at the full picture with a guy like Drake May. I think it's partially why other North Carolina quarterback had a great season in his sophomore year in Sam Howell, and then slid all the way to the 5th round when he lost all of his talent around him. So I don't think Drake May is going to slide too much, but I do think he should be priority number 1 if I was the Commanders. And, like we said, this is not what we would do. This is what we think might happen. And with the Cardinals, you have to figure that Marvin is the number 1 guy on their board. They want Marvin Harrison. They need a number 1 receiver. If they view Malik Neighbors and Rome Odunze similarly, or, even potentially a 4th receiver in this class similarly, they might be okay with sliding down to number 8 and being like, we'll take whoever falls. We, expect maybe the Chargers to not go with a receiver. We think they're going to go different position or something like that. Maybe they have inside information and they're okay moving down. But I also could see the Cardinals being like, nah, we like Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze more than the other option. And we know that the Chargers, the Giants, and the Titans are a threat to take a wide receiver. So we don't want to even risk it. We're just going to take them here.
Yeah, this would be a process move. Again, we're a fantasy channel. This would more so be a process move. Let's just say in your rookie draft, you're trading down from the 102 to the 105 and picking up a 2025 first. This would be the type of move that the Cardinals would be making in this instance, knowing that they could, Dallas Turner, worst case scenario, a defensive lineman, worst case scenario, if they miss out on the wide receivers, they'd be in a content spot to move down 4 spots to 8. And right off the bat, like I mentioned, from a fantasy perspective, if Drake May landed with those weapons on the outside in Atlanta, I think you can make the case for him being the 101 in rookie drafts. So would love that. We can move on now to the number 5 overall selection. Talking about great time quarterbacks, we're talking about Justin Herbert. We're talking about his new head coach there with Jim Harbaugh. Where are you leaning here at the 5th overall pick?
Yeah, again, part of me wants to just be like, oh, Malik Neighbors, great landing spot for Malik Neighbors. This is exactly what I would do. But this is not what I would do. This is what the Chargers would do. And
I
I
know where you're
believe
leaning.
that the NFL and the Chargers especially prefer Rome Odunze. So I'm going to take Rome Odunze to the Los Angeles Chargers. I think Brock Bowers also would be in consideration as well, given his talent level. But he is a tight end, and I haven't really heard a whole lot of steam on Brock Bowers, like what the NFL thinks of him right now. But I do think Rome Odunze, I have heard a lot of steam on. I think the NFL thinks he's a top 3 to 5 player in this draft. And I do believe most teams will prefer him to Malik Neighbors, even though I do not personally, even though I love Rome Odunze. I think he's a great prospect and he should absolutely be worthy of this selection. I think Malik Neighbors is a little bit better, but regardless, I think the Chargers, they see their long-term Keenan Allen replacement here. It's Rome Odunze plus athleticism on Keenan Allen's play style.
Yeah, no, I don't mind that at all with Romo Dunze at that spot. Underrated factor, obviously. Jim Harbaugh doing a lot of extensive prep on Romo Dunze when they were preparing to play them in the Natty. So he's going to know this guy's game in and out, watching him for 2 weeks leading up to that game. So if he fell in love, if he really loved what Romo Dunze showed on display, then I can absolutely see this be the spot. Spot where I thought you were going to go actually would be Brock Bowers, knowing that Jim Harbaugh, history with the tight end position, grittier type of offense he wants to instill on the Chargers. That would have been the potential direction, but I do like the Rome Odunze fit being the long-term Keenan Allen replacement there when it comes to the LA Chargers. So now we're on the clock at pick number 6. You guys got mad last time when I took an offensive lineman, so I will not do that this time because I do think the best player available would also be my best player available here with Malik Neighbors. Seamless fit. They need a number 1 wide receiver, Malik Neighbors. He's not Marvin Harrison Jr., but goddamn, is he a special talent. I think he's legitimately got the top 5 overall wide receiver in the NFL type of ceiling. And if you're New York, you need to surround either Daniel Jones or your potential next quarterback with that legit number 1 weapon that Malik Neighbors represents.
Yeah, I mean, going after a 6 foot, 190 pound something receiver from LSU has worked for you in the past. So I would say Malik Neighbors is a great fit. And I really like this. I think a lot of people would really, downgrade Malik Neighbors from like a fantasy perspective. Again, we're a Dynasty channel or whatever.
Yeah.
I think Malik Neighbors would be a ton of fun for the Giants. They
Agreed.
don't have anybody that can do everything on that offense. They have deep threats. They have slot receivers. They have whatever. Like they don't have a guy that can do everything, and Malik Neighbors can absolutely do everything. Picture dropping DJ Moore into that offense, dropping Stephon Diggs or Brandon Ayuk into that offense. So Tennessee, I think they got screwed here. This is not ideal for them. So what I am considering, I don't know if I'm going to do it, but what I'm considering, we're hearing a lot of talk about JJ McCarthy, man. We're hearing a lot of talk that people are really high on him. You're the Michigan fan, so I will save you from some bias here and thinking everybody's just going to, assume that you're going to be the one to do this. The Minnesota Vikings are going to trade up for JJ McCarthy with the Tennessee Titans because I believe the Titans would be very inclined to move down the board here. All of the offensive tackles are available. The Jets realistically are the only threat to take one of them, and I think if they have them graded similarly, they'd be okay with moving down here. So we're going to come up with the Minnesota Vikings. It is a quarterback. The 42 is not going to be enough. They're going to need their round 1 and 25%. Because that's just how the quarterback tax works. I'm sorry, Tennessee Titans fans, you're going to hate me for this, or Minnesota Vikings fans, sorry, you're going to hate me for this one. But this is, again, I think that the NFL is very, very high on JJ McCarthy.
Yeah.
Again, what does the NFL care about? They care about young upside. They care about winners. They care about toughness. They care about, big programs like
pro style offense.
Yeah, it doesn't get much better than JJ McCarthy when it comes to what the NFL cares about. I have concerns about JJ McCarthy. I don't think he's particularly good under pressure. I think he needs development in decision making, especially. But he does have some upside. He is, I've heard people say he's Zach Wilson without the bonehead mistakes. But I will say, in defense of Zach Wilson as a prospect, he was also he's much more talented, I believe, than JJ McCarthy, even though I think McCarthy is talented. And they have the same bugaboo. They have the same problem. They're both bad under pressure. So I worry about that with JJ McCarthy, but I believe that the Vikings and other teams too. I think the reason that the Vikings would have to trade up here is because I think the Broncos would be calling the Titans. The Raiders would be calling the Titans. The Seahawks might be calling the Titans. There's other teams that are going to be interested in moving up for a quarterback. Apparently, they're not very high on next year's class, even though I think Shadur Sanders and Quinn Ewers and Carson Beck and Drew Aller and some of these other guys might have some upside. I believe that the NFL, and Daniel Jeremiah has said this, is not high on next year's class. So the time to get a quarterback would be now. The Vikings are going to, I guess, let Kirk Cousins walk or whatever in this situation. So we're going to give him JJ McCarthy to the Minnesota Vikings. And it is a very good fit stylistically, schematically.
Yeah, and you mentioned the tools. I'm a little bit higher on the tools there. I do think he's really comparable as a prospect to Zach Wilson. Obviously, Zach Wilson putting up the bigger numbers, JJ McCarthy playing the bigger competition. So they all obviously both had their bugaboos respectively. But with JJ McCarthy, youngest quarterback in the class, natural athlete, big time arm, can work out a structure. Like those are the type of things that I can see the Minnesota Vikings, the NFL really prioritizing in this situation. And like you said, working with O'Connell, working with those weapons on the outside. Vikings fans may hate us for having them make this move, but if JJ McCarthy becomes a franchise quarterback, I don't really think you're going to be caring about that 2025 one. So they take JJ McCarthy here at the 7th overall pick. Now we're on the clock here with the Cardinals. And honestly, when you went up with the Titans, I thought you were going to run up and take Joe Alt. So if you're a Titans fan, comment down below. Would you have stuck and picked there? Or do you like the move moving down to 11, getting a 2025 first? Like I said, with the Cardinals, the more process type of move here. I really like what you were able to do with that trade. So we move on to the Cardinals. Like I said, we're in a tough spot here. You could be looking at a number of different directions. You go with Paris Johnson Jr. there last year as a developmental tackle, which kind of gets me off a guy like Olu Fashanu playing that type of role. It's tricky, man. You got Trey McBride, so you're not taking with Brock Bowers. Joe Alt, I kind of just mentioned with Olu Fashanu. You don't really need a tackle there. I think this is where cornerback 1 in the class comes off the board. And I'm looking at a guy like Nate Wiggins. Really impressed what he was able to do. Watched him throughout a number of wide receivers in this class, their games against Clemson, and it really stood out how good Nate Wiggins was playing those games, really putting the clamps down. I really noticed Nate Wiggins being that physical outside cornerback. So again, I'm not going to act like I've done extensive tape study on Nate Wiggins, but I know that when I watched other wide receivers, they struggled to get separation for him. So I will take him here as the cornerback 1 off the board at 8th overall.
Yeah, I think I personally would have gone Terry Arnold if I was going with a corner. Sure. Again, I mean, how many receivers have we watched against Alabama this year? And Terry Arnold put the clamps on a couple of them as well. So I really like what he was able to do. But yeah, I think that makes sense. I think getting a corner, they need help on their defense in general. It sucks that you can't walk away with this draft with Marvin Harrison Jr. like every Cardinals fan probably wants to. But if the Patriots take Marvin, which is definitely a possibility, then this is something that you might have to think about. A trade down scenario, take cornerback 1. That makes a lot of sense, I think, for Cardinals fans.
Agreed. Yeah, and I mean, and you're in the spot, right, where you could argue maybe they take an edge rusher, corner, obviously big-time priority. I believe Marco Wilson is still starting for them, which was a day 3 pick just a couple years ago. So if you're a Cardinals fan, comment down below what direction you would have gone, because I do think you can go, even if you want another offensive lineman, even if you want another defensive lineman, you could have gone a number of directions.
Yeah, this is one that's really tough for me, this 9th overall pick, because I think the Bears fans are hoping that you can grab your quarterback at number 1 overall and still get a wide receiver at 9th overall. But I really don't think it's going to happen. Like every pick in front of them has a real possibility of taking wide receiver. With the Cardinals, had the Titans stayed there, they would have possibly taken a wide receiver. The Giants, the Chargers, all those teams, the Patriots, all in danger of taking some of those wide receivers off the board. So with the Chicago Bears, I'm looking at like what exactly the direction is here. I think their offensive tackles are probably pretty set. Like, I'm not sure that they would actually take a guy like Joe Alt. I think they would probably dangle this pick to somebody to come up and get ahead of the Jets, who I think absolutely want a offensive tackle, or maybe even Brock Bowers to come off the board here. So
I have a team that might be willing.
What's up, sir?
I have a team that might be willing.
Okay, who do you think?
Well, I think this would be super sharp move from this GM, but like I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't have been shocked if the Titans stuck and pick at 7 and took an offensive lineman. They were able to maneuver the board, move from 7 to 11, pick up a first, and then only have to trade maybe a second to jump the Jets and get their preferred tackle. I can see that being the case.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's get the Titans. They trade down. Obviously, they pick up a 2025 first, so they're going to pocket some picks no matter what here. They're going to have to give up, let's say, give them a round 2 in 2025 and their 4th round or something like that. That seems pretty fair. Like, I don't think it would cost them too much to move down 2 spots, because I think the Bears, again, would be pretty motivated to move down here. The real question is there other teams, like are the Saints trying to come up, or the Colts trying to come up, or whatever, try and get ahead of the Jets? The Jets might be on the like the Bears might be telling the Jets, like, hey, we got teams trying to hop you. Do you want to swap 1 pick for 1 pick, and we go down to 10 and you come up and get your preferred tackle? In this situation, I think both tackles are on the board. The Jets might be like, you know what, we're not going to trade up. We'll just take whoever falls.
Yeah, no, I agree. So we'll plot that out. Titans go up, take Joe Alt. I mean, we obviously have Brian Callahan coming in there as the new head coach of that team. T. Higgins potentially rumored there in free agency. Let's just say they signed T. Higgins. You draft your franchise tackle here with Joe Alt. You really give Will Levis the best chance to succeed at the next level because everybody's jobs is on the line for Will Levis right now.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, Will Levis is your number one priority, whether that's getting him receiver talent, which, like you said, they could do in free agency, or getting him offensive line talent, because outside of Peter Skoronski, dude, like their offensive line might be the worst in the league. Like it is really, really bad. There's not a lot of talent there. So they are definitely, priority number one for them, even though they took an offensive lineman in the first round last year, is fixing their offensive line by any means necessary. And I think free agency will tell a lot with what direction they're thinking they're going to go in the draft, because they could also go out and sign a big offensive lineman in free agency. The Jets are on the board here. I think they would have a pretty tough decision between Brock Bowers and the tackle. Which direction are you going to go?
Yeah, I think I'm just going to take the other tackle here. Obviously, Brock Bowers is alluring, but I also really think that Olu has a ton of potential. I know Jets fans have argued this back and forth. Like, if Brock Bowers is there at 10, do we take him? I just don't foresee them doing that over such a priority position at tackle and such a talent like Olu being able to get here. So we saw what happened to Aaron Rodgers in the first game of last season. Obviously, very unfortunate with what happened, but the cause of that was because of a lack of offensive line play. Plug and play left tackle here, Olu I don't think you think back.
Yeah, that's not a bad pick at all. I think Brock Bowers has a chance to slide down the board for the NFL, because he's not going to win any beauty pageants. Let's just get that straight right now. Like when we talk about, guys that can rise in the draft process, Brock Bowers' best asset is when he's on the field playing football games. So yes, when he's doing, he's a good athlete. He's going to test well at the combine, but he looks like Hunter Renfrow, for fuck's sakes. Like he's not going to win any beauty pageants from that perspective. So I could see him, as the offseason goes along, he might weigh in at 238 pounds or something like that. Teams are going to start to have question marks about him, and he might slide down the board. So that's kind of a predictive thing that we're doing a little bit here with Brock Bowers. Is like, could he go as high as 5th overall to the Chargers? Absolutely. Yeah. But is it more possible? I think that he slides to the late, top 10 or early teens or whatever. I think that's definitely possible as well. So I'm actually going to go with edge 1 in this class. A guy, again, we watch so much Alabama tape, so I'm going to roll with Dallas Turner here. I believe he's the best edge rusher in this class, at least that I have watched so far. It doesn't sound like the Senior Bowl guys overly blew people away. So I think yeah, I mean, there was high performers there for sure, but I think Dallas Turner, dude, when I was watching him, he was making Brock Bowers, for what it's worth, he blocked everybody at a high level. But when he matched up with Dallas Turner, dude, he got wiped. He got wiped by Dallas Turner. And I think that speaks a lot more to Dallas Turner's ability than it does to Brock Bowers' ability as a blocker.
No, I completely agree. And the other guy I was referencing there when I said one did well was Latu, who I know has been getting a lot of buzz. I really do think that the NFL is going to view those two guys as the top 2 edge rushers, but tiebreaker obviously being Dallas Turner, younger player, Latu having those medical concerns behind the table. So yeah, we don't know the severity of them. So for the sake of this, we'll just say that they take the cleaner projection with Dallas Turner. I think that'd be a really good fit, pairing him next to Montez Sweat for the future if you're a Chicago Bears fan. So you could always tack, a number 2 wide receiver for the long term in the second round, given how deep this class is. But you mentioned the trade up for the Minnesota Vikings to go to 7 and take their guy JJ McCarthy. I got a guy that's going to fit perfectly with Sean Payton over there in Denver. And we've already heard the rumors that they're going to be moving on from Russell Wilson. You need a long-term figure to run that Sean Payton offense. I don't think there's a better quarterback in this class to do that than Bo Nix. I really watched him. And to me, when I was watching him, I really noticed that if he hits his upper percentile, we're looking at like a Dak Prescott level player, can make plays out of structure, maybe doesn't have a Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen level arm, but definitely an adequate level arm to be in that top echelon of quarterback. And what I really noticed with him is that despite not having to do much in terms of post-snap processing, what I really noticed is that his pre-snap processing may be arguably the best in the class. Like getting them into the right plays, knowing where he's got to go with the ball, diagnosing that before the snap, and getting rid of the ball is one of his best traits. And I noticed that with Dak Prescott with the Cowboys all the time, getting them into the right play, making the right read, getting the ball out of his hands. And with Sean Payton, he's the type of guy that really values timing. He really values the cerebral part of being a quarterback. And I think Bo Nix really represents that for him. Experienced quarterback, showed major improvement throughout college, and I really think Sean Payton's going to love that.
Yeah, and I mean, Sean Payton's dealt with his share of bonehead quarterbacks at the end of his Saints run, where he had like Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill playing quarterback for him before he retired or whatever. So I definitely could see him going after a guy. You need somebody right away. If you don't sign a big free agent, a guy like Bo Nix is appealing because he played, 5 or 6 years in college. He's a guy that's an older prospect. He's more mature. I'm sure he's going to be good on the whiteboard and during interviews and that kind of
Yes.
thing. So I really do think that the Broncos are the team for Bo Nix. I think if he goes in the first round, I believe it will be the Broncos that take him, but I could be wrong. In this situation with the Raiders, I'm actually going to assume, we haven't, like, the Vikings traded up for a quarterback and the Broncos just took Bo Nix. So let's assume Kirk Cousins went to the Raiders in this scenario, because Kirk Cousins got to go somewhere, right? And if he doesn't stay with the Vikings, doesn't go with the Broncos, doesn't go with other teams that, have a franchise quarterback need or whatever, maybe went to the Patriots because they took Marvin Harrison.
That's what I was thinking
overall. But I'm going to actually go in a direction here with the Raiders that I look at their team, other than quarterback and like some of the other like defensive needs that they have. I think their roster is just like objectively mid across the board. I don't really see a whole lot going on in terms of what I think they could, find a screaming value on the board right now. So I'm going to do like a Raiders thing here and kind of go off the board a little bit. I'm not as high on Jerson Newton as a PFF is. I think he's, probably relatively a decent prospect, but like they have him like way ahead of all the other interior defensive line guys. I'm just going to go with Jerson Newton here. He makes a lot of sense. They need some talent up front other than Max Crosby. So let's give him Jerson Newton. Again, if you're a Raiders fan, let me know in the comments like what you think they would do if they don't go quarterback in round one. Because honestly, like I don't follow a whole lot of Raiders stuff, and I think this just kind of makes sense stylistically, but they might have their guys in the draft that all their beat reporters are talking about that I don't know about yet. So Jerson Newton is the guy that I'm going to give them here, and then I'll let you be on the board here with the Saints.
Well, the only thing I was going to say, the other direction I could have seen was potentially going with like a Tyrion Arnold, maybe a cornerback too in this class. That's the other way, but I also don't think getting a nice interior defensive lineman to pair next to Max Crosby could definitely work out for them. I thought you were going to say Byron Murphy, to be honest, because he's your Texas boy. I thought you were going to say I'm going down the board a little bit on this one, but regardless, whether it was Byron Murphy or Jerson Newton, I really like the fit there for the Raiders. Now we are back on the clock here with the Saints. Quarterback, tackle, and defensive line listed as their biggest needs. You could go with a guy like Brock Bowers here. I think that would make a ton of sense, but I also think that teams are going to fall in love with Talis Fuaga, big-time plug-and-play tackle prospect. We already saw 2 tackles go off the board that come second round, I feel like a team can convince themselves that they can take JT Sanders and he can start at tight end for them. Don't necessarily see that being the case in this tackle class. I feel like a lot of them are going to be dried up by the top 35, by the top 40, because I can see realistically, given how good of a class it is and given how much offensive line need there is in the NFL, 10 tackles going off the board by the 40th pick. So I will take tackle here. I think it's a smart choice getting ahead of the run for the Saints.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. This is the part of the draft where like the defensive and like other prospects, again, we're a fantasy channel. I'm not totally well-versed on these guys outside of the fantasy players. So we'll probably, breeze through those a little bit more. So again, if you guys are well-versed on the defensive class and we make a pick for your team and you don't like it, just definitely let us know. But, defensive stuff is not our focus. I am going to run to the podium with the Indianapolis Colts because Brock Bowers is a perfect fit for their offense. Shane Steichen using a guy like Dallas Goedert in a variety of ways with Philadelphia. I mean, you got a guy that is a true chess piece in the passing game. If you re-sign Michael Pittman Jr., you have Josh Downs there. Alec Pierce is a win sprints king. He just runs down the field at full speed all the time. Brock Bowers is the second target that your offense needs, but I also think it doesn't make sense for you guys to just take a wide receiver because I think all of your 3 wide receivers actually accomplish their own individual goals. So with Brock Bowers, you have like nobody starting at tight end. People are going to talk about Jelani Woods or like Mo Alley Cox or whatever. Those guys are not 85, 90% of the snap type of players. They work in as role players when you're in 2 and 3 tight end sets. So you can still use those guys. They still have their uses. But I think Brock Bowers is the guy that is going to anchor your tight end position, help your run game out as well. Even though he's undersized, I believe he's going to be a plus blocker in the NFL for Jonathan Taylor, for Anthony Richardson, who obviously are probably going to be the backbone of your offense. So give me Brock Bowers. If you guys are running a lot of play action, this is a dude that can leak out on those routes. He can get downfield. He can do everything for you, and he is the perfect fit for your offense. And I know Brock, our resident Colts fan, is probably screaming in the comments right now, loving this pick.
Oh, yeah, he's absolutely in the comments saying, like, let's go, all caps. Really excited about the fit. And, yeah, like you mentioned, he also brings a tough mentality, which we've seen with Steichen that he implemented when he came over with the Colts. They want to be a tough football team. get that Georgia Bulldog added in. I mean, this is a guy that doesn't take plays off. We've seen Brock Bowers be able to do it a number of ways. Complete tight end. I mean, you're looking at potentially if he lives up to his upside as a George Kittle 2.0. And I really trust Shane Steichen to get the best out of him in this offense, like you mentioned. So love that pick. I think the Seahawks are going to go off the board here. And this is my reasoning. You got Mike Macdonald now as your new head coach. Where does he come from? He comes from the Ravens. What did the Ravens do a couple years ago? Took a pro-ready, starting caliber offensive lineman just out of glamorous position. They took a center. They took Tyler Linderbaum in that draft a couple years ago. Very similar prospect this year. We're hearing a lot of reports that Jackson Powers Johnson is the clear number one center in this draft. Tough, coming from Oregon, Dan Lanning mentality really built into him, and he dominated at the Senior Bowl. So I really think the Seahawks here in the mid-first round take the first center off the board and go with Jackson Powers Johnson, a guy that started off in the second round of the PFF Big Board, has worked his way all the way up to number 22. So this would feel like a Seahawks pick, dominating the trenches.
Absolutely. Yeah. If I was picking for the Seahawks, I would have gone in the same direction. I do think he's going to go this high now after what he did at the Senior Bowl as well. So definitely love the pick there. It's wild to me that the Jags have edge as listed one of their biggest needs when they took a guy at first overall a couple of years ago. They took another guy and Chase on in the first round, and they have Josh Allen already, who played at an all-pro level this year. So it's wild that edge is that big of a need on their board right now. This to me kind of seems like a best player available situation. And I think Terrion Arnold is just simply too good to be on the board right now. I know that, the Jags might go after a wide receiver at this pick. I could see them going with Brian Thomas or Adonai Mitchell or, whatever wide receiver you like at this spot. I just think, Calvin Ridley to me is good enough as a number one X outside wide receiver for you. Christian Kirk, hopefully back healthy. Maybe, there's rounds 2 and 3 of the draft. There's free agency. You could always address the wide receiver need later on with a very deep class as well. So for me, I think Terrion Arnold represents something that you don't have, which is a lockdown number one corner. And your defense was pretty good at the beginning of the year last year, and it kind of tapered off a little bit. And I think a lot of that was due to your secondary, not your pass rush. Your pass rush was pretty strong all year. Run defense was pretty strong all year, but you need somebody to lock down the Michael Pittmans of your division, the Nico Collins of your division. Tennessee will probably address the wide receiver position in free agency, potentially, like we said, with a guy like T. Higgins. So Terrion Arnold, a guy that I think when he stood out with all these wide receivers. When I was watching them against Alabama, he played very, very well against pretty much everybody except for Adonai Mitchell, but Mitchell actually did most of his damage against the safeties and against McKinstry. So I do think that Terrion Arnold is a guy that I'm very, very confident in, especially watch the game against LSU and how well he handled Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. You'll be very impressed.
Yeah, no, I agree there with Terrion Arnold. And I really do think if you take Terrion Arnold here at 17, you pair him with Tyson Campbell, you're instantly looking at one of the best 1-2 punches at corner in the NFL. It's really just the best player available at a very valuable position at this current point. Taking a great player, he's playing a valuable position. You give you potential future leverage where if Tyson Campbell starts asking for the bag, now you have Terrion Arnold to potentially replace him. So really love the fit there for Terrion Arnold. Like I said, can pose one of the best 1-2 punches at corner.
One last thing on that real quick is look at the team that just won the Super Bowl. They had 2 all-pro caliber corners. Yes. Yeah, they have Patrick Mahomes, but Trent McDuffie and L'Jarius Sneed are probably the reason they stayed in that game.
Yes, I know, absolutely. And their work on Debo throughout the game, they really got into his head. We noticed that throughout that Super Bowl game, especially in the second half comeback. So love that comparison. Bengals on the clock here, and you could potentially make the case for a tackle going here, but I really love this fit, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to be taking wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. of LSU. Kind of mentioned he had a down game against Alabama. A lot of wide receivers, like we said, had a down game against Alabama. If you're worried about that game, just put on the Florida tape because he was absolutely dominant throughout that game. Brian Thomas, potential T. Higgins replacement. This is the theory here that T. Higgins signs with the Titans, reunites with Brian Callahan. Well, guess what? You just get a player that could potentially be the T. Higgins 2.0 in your offense. You had him comp to Nico Collins. I think that is a very good comp for him as well. I think what we see with Brian Thomas is that natural big athletic wide receiver that can win at all 3 levels. And I really think that Cincinnati Bengals, you know how much of a priority your offense is. Make sure it is intact going forward.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me as well. I think Brian Thomas is just that long, lean, athletic guy that can help stretch the field, as we've kind of talked about on numerous occasions with Thomas there. So I'm on the board with the Rams, and the Rams are weird, right? Because when was the last time they actually picked in the first round? It was like 2016. So we never talk about them during the NFL draft season because all the first round mocks don't have the Rams in them. They've also done such a good job of finding talent on day 3 and then day 2 of the draft that, a lot of their needs, O-line, D-line, secondary, they've actually hit on a lot of their late round picks so far. So for me, I'm just going to roll with a guy that I think is a really good prospect who I think plays a premium position, and I'm going to roll with J.C. Latham. I think you just find a place for him on your offensive line, whether that's at right tackle, whether that's at guard or whatever. Maybe he can switch over to the left side. I think just adding bodies to your offensive line, you never pick in the first round. You never get these premium positions in the first round, like tackle, like corner, like whatever. There's a possibility you could go with a Cooper DeJean there. You could go with a Quinyon Mitchell, who's on the rise after the Senior Bowl as well. So I like that fit. I think they throw a pick at a premium position because they never get to do it.
Yeah, no, I don't mind that at all. Getting a stud potential tackle added to that team. Matthew Stafford aging. You want to make sure his last years are fully protected. So I don't mind that at all. I'm on the clock here with the Steelers at number 20, and I could go with a different number of directions, but I want to pose a question to you, and it involves your favorite team specifically. If it came to this, with the Bucs picking at 26 overall, looking at number 20, do you think that they would be interested in a move up to potentially get a guy like Laiatu Latu?
To be honest, I'm down for a move up, but not for Laiatu Latu.
Really? Okay, fair. So you would want to move up, or would you?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do it. I think
okay.
There's a player on the Bucs board that I know Todd Bowles would absolutely love to have. So let's do it. 26. Give up our something like that. That makes sense. Let's give him the round 2 next year in 126. That seems like it would be pretty fair.
Sounds good. So we'll do that. And who is Todd Bowles got his eye on?
There's a chess piece defensive back on the board, and I know Todd Bowles can't resist himself a chess piece defensive back. Cooper DeJean. I mean, we've gone to Iowa before. We took Tristan Wirfs from Iowa. We took Anthony Nelson from Iowa. I know he's comfortable going to this school, or Jason Light is, I should say, comfortable going to this school. Antoine Winfield Jr. is the best safety in the league, in my opinion. He's the best free safety in the league. He plays all over the field, and I actually think his best position is to be a free safety most of the time, but also rush the passer on blitzes and that kind of thing. Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean, they had up and down seasons this year. You found some, diamonds in the rough with Zion McCollum on day 3 or in the late round 3, whenever they took him in 2022. He actually developed really nicely this year. You picked up Christian Izien basically as like an undrafted free agent last year. The secondary is a good unit, but we don't have a strong safety right now. Like Ryan Neal was playing strong safety. So Cooper DeJean, he can play all over the field. He can play outside corner. He can play slot corner. He can play at safety if you need him to. You just find a spot for him. And there's nobody in the NFL, to be honest, that I trust more to develop a defensive back than Todd Bowles. And I know that's biased because I'm a Buccaneers fan, but look at his track record. Carlton Davis, Jamel Dean, Antoine Winfield, Jordan Whitehead, Mike Edwards played very well in the Super Bowl last night for the Kansas City Chiefs. He takes these second, third, fourth rounders and develops them into stud outside corners and safeties. And they never spend picks in the first round on the secondary because they never have to, because Todd Bowles is so good at developing these guys. So I think he can take a versatile chess piece like Cooper DeJean, turn him into whatever he wants.
Yeah, no, I dig that play. So technically I am even. So you are back on the clock here with the Miami Dolphins. Where are you leaning? Because we are seeing some edges fall. We're seeing, potential corners fall. They could go with an offensive lineman. Number direction with the Miami Dolphins.
Yeah, this is brutal because, I mean, the obvious connection here is you go with another UCLA edge rusher who has injury concerns. But, I mean, knowing that you have Chubb and Phillips coming off of major injuries, like you probably want to go with the guy that's the healthier of the two. So let's give him Jared Verse here from Florida State. If they have them rated similarly, it's possible that we see Latu slide a little bit given the injury concerns that some teams are having, and especially for the Dolphins, knowing that you kind of need somebody on the field right away to play edge rusher for you and work into the rotation, and it gives you the flexibility to maybe not pay Phillips once he's up for his contract, or maybe cut bait with Bradley Chubb after a year or two if Verse develops. So, I mean, teams are always going to want to throw bullets at the edge rusher position, and these guys sliding is honestly probably a little unrealistic because they always go high in the draft, but for whatever reason, that's kind of how this ended up happening.
Yeah, I don't mind that at all with Jared Verse going there to the Miami Dolphins. We're on the clock here. My most hated team, or at least second most hated team. Don't worry. If you're an Eagles fan, I'm not going to screw you over. There's a ton of really good talent at the top of the board there, namely Latu, Mitchell, and McKinstry, that if you're an Eagles fan and you get mocked one of these guys, I think you're going to be feeling pretty good. So Layout Tulatu, best pass rusher potentially in the class. Injury concerns has him down here at 22. Quinyon Mitchell, big time performance at the Senior Bowl, big athletic, small school cornerback. And then with Kool-Aid McKinstry, like you said, the Alabama secondary was dominating against a lot of the best wide receiver corps in college football. So those are the main three guys. I'm really stuck between which one I want to mock here. I feel like if I mock them a corner, like we're going to see on draft day how he just takes the slide at edge. And I mean, everybody's going to talk about how obvious it was. So I don't know. I'm going to go Quinyon Mitchell, but if they went with an edge rusher, I would not be shocked.
Yeah, for sure. I'm actually just going to move us real quick just so we're not blocking the board so everybody can see it because we're getting down a little bit further now and people probably wondering who's available and that kind of thing. So, yeah, makes a lot of sense. Quinyon Mitchell, it sounds like he's going to test well. He had a great week at the Senior Bowl. Everybody's excited about him. So I wouldn't be shocked if he even goes higher than this, to be honest.
I agree. I mean, like the corner's kind of falling now. I'm realizing how many top-end corners are in this class because we're on cornerback 4, cornerback 5, and you can make the case that Kool-Aid McKinstry would be a top 3 cornerback in a lot of other years. That just shows you how much depth there is in this class.
Yeah, and speaking of depth at a position in this class, I don't think that the Texans' biggest need is wide receiver at all. But I will say the best position group on the board probably right now is wide receivers. So what I think I would do if I was the Houston Texans, you got a shifty slot receiver in Tank Dell who can also stretch the field vertically. You have your vertical outside deep threat guy in Nico Collins. My question would be, if you want to go to the wide receiver board real quick, do you want to get like a power player, a guy that's like physical and can dominate in the short area of the field? Because then a guy like Keon Coleman would make some sense. Do you want to get a guy that's maybe an eventual long-term replacement for Nico Collins because you don't want to pay him once he's up in free agency? Adonai Mitchell would make sense. Ladd McConkey kind of could play the similar role to Tank Dell, so I don't think he's really a great fit there. I think Troy Franklin makes a lot of sense as well. I'm going to go with Adonai Mitchell because I think he has the opportunity and the versatility to be a power player for you early on and maybe eventually develop into what Nico Collins has become already, so you don't have to pay him in free agency. So I really like the fit there with Adonai Mitchell. I think this is kind of just as simple as saying the Texans are actually a relatively well-rounded roster, as surprising as that sounds for a team that was picking second in the draft last year. I don't think there's really one need that they have to go after. They could take, Latu to go along with Will Anderson. That would make some sense there. They could take McKinstry because they could use a corner opposite Derek Stingley, but their defense played pretty well, and D'Amico Ryans elevated the play of pretty much everybody across the board. So I trust their ability actually more so on defense to get the best out of their talent than I do even on offense, even though they have CJ Stroud. Just give Stroud everything he needs. There's no reason to not do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The more Robert Woods snaps we see on the field, the worse that the Texans offense is going to be. So getting another wide receiver option where if Tank Dell misses time, Nico Collins misses time, or flat out, you want to get all three of these guys on the field at the same time. Very, very sharp move. But I'm on the clock here with the Cowboys, and I think there's a really interesting situation, and I want to trade down. There's a team that I'm looking at that you are controlling that I think would be very interested in potentially moving up for the last added position. Now, I am targeting number 29 overall, Detroit Lions, potentially wanting to move up for a guy like Kool-Aid McKinstry.
Yeah, let's no. You know what? Let's really? Hold. Let's hold. I'm going to hold. I want to see what else we can get for Detroit because I agree. I think a lot of their biggest needs are in the defensive interior as well as in the interior offensive line as well. So I think secondary is something that they can address later in the draft or in free agency. So I think Arnold is much better than McKinstry. When I watch Alabama games, McKinstry I thought would be the better corner, but I actually saw him get beat a lot more.
Fair.
And there's a lot of good corners in this class too. There's no guarantee that you need to even take McKinstry this high.
Fair. I mean, with that being said, I'm just going to look at number 30 overall with the Baltimore Ravens. Losing Mike McDonald, very familiar going to this school with Alabama. Don't think it would cost a lot. I think it'd be a 1 and a 3, but I'll just do it with the Ravens then. So 30th overall, let's just say it costs 30 and 93 to get 24. Back end of the first rounder, back end of the third rounder to move up 6 spots. And in my opinion, as much as I like the cornerback position, I really do think that Kool-Aid stands out. So I will be selecting him there.
Yeah, that makes some sense. I think that the Ravens have obviously shown propensity to go to Alabama, and they've also shown propensity to invest in the secondary in the first round as well. So makes a lot of sense to me. I'm going to roll with the Packers here. This one's going to be pretty brief. David Bakhtiari, I mean, you can't rely on the guy anymore. Amarius Mims is getting a lot of buzz as like an upside swing at tackle, and I think I actually trust Matt LaFleur quite a bit to be able to develop young players just based on what I've seen from the Packers in the past year, being able to develop all those young wide receivers and, of course, Jordan Love. So Amarius Mims actually stands out to me as a guy that makes a lot of sense here. Going back again, when you think of what the NFL likes, they like big school prospects, man.
Yeah.
No NFL GM wants to stake their, nuts on the chopping block for a guy that went to, Western Kentucky or Toledo or whatever. No offense to, Corley and Quinyon Mitchell. They're good prospects. It's just, you feel better about going up against a guy that has seen good pass rushers in college football with Amarius Mims playing at Georgia.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that's a good pick for where they would want to go. So we have the Steelers back on the clock here. Center, DB, and linebacker listed at their biggest needs. So it makes more sense now. The Ravens want to move up ahead of the Steelers, snipe their division rival. How many times have we seen them do that? So now we go back. We could look at a corner here. Could look at maybe the first safety off the board. I know a guy like Tyler Nubin's been getting a ton of hype, so could go that direction. I think I'm going to go with Ennis here. I don't know how to pronounce it. Rakestraw, whatever. If you're a Missouri fan, please comment down below because I want to make sure I get his name right. But they need a DB. Get him here at number 26, pairing with Joey Porter Jr. for the long term. Very sound Steelers pick.
Yeah, for sure. It makes a lot of sense. How did we get the Cardinals down here? What happened with
Texans
them?
pick. They traded down.
Right. Okay.
Right.
So
no.
the Texans trade.
It's the Texans' original pick. Sorry.
Oh, right. Yeah. So last year's draft, they got
the
Texans' original pick. It's just weird that the Texans pick ended
Will
up.
Anderson deal.
Yeah, being 27 is crazy. That this is the pick that they actually got in the Will Anderson trade. I would be pretty excited if I was a Cardinals fan to still have Latu on the board. So I think Latu's got to be your pick here, right? They go, what was it, cornerback 1 with their first pick, and then they grab a number 1 edge rusher here with their 27th pick. So I mean, even though they didn't get Marvin Harrison or whatever
top of the second round,
were looking for, you got to feel pretty good about getting 2 potential cornerstone pieces for your defense. A unit that was horrible. Jonathan Gannon's a defensive coach. He's going to want to build up that defense as much as you want to help Kyler Murray and get him a number 1 receiver. You have guys. I mean, you have Marquise Brown still. He's a free agent. You can re-sign him. You have Trey McBride at tight end. You have a decent run game right now with James Conner. There's other positions you can or other times that you can address the wide receiver position later on in the second and third round because it's a deep class. So I actually really like what we've done with the Cardinals so far, and they've picked up a ton of capital too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that would be a fantastic start. Like if you're a Cardinals fan and you see Latu, Nate Wiggins added to your team, potentially at the top of the second round, if that's the spot you want to attack wide receiver. I mean, look at wide receiver alone. If you're a Cardinals fan, you can still get Troy Franklin, Ladd McConkey, not Keon Coleman, because that's who's going to be going here at 28th overall with the Buffalo Bills. Love the fit. Potential long-term Gabe Davis replacement. Can really be that physical X wide receiver that they need added to complement Stephon Diggs. Obviously, Stephon Diggs being the elite separator that he is, struggling a little bit more with physicality. Add Keon Coleman, you'll have no issues in that receiving core.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think Coleman's ideal landing spot for him specifically is the Buffalo Bills because you get to learn how to run routes properly from a guy that knows how to do it at a high level with Stephon Diggs, and you get to play the role that at least you're capable of playing immediately. And he's a very young player. He's one of the youngest receivers in this class, and he could still get a lot better. He does need to get a lot better in terms of separation ability and that kind of thing, but people keep talking about how he doesn't have like elite straight line speed, but it's kind of similar. He almost reminds me of like a worse Drake London, where it's like the basketball background shows up. He can win at the catch point, and that late third phase of your route separation is so underrated with Keon Coleman, where, yeah, he's not going to break ankles like Ladd McConkey, but he can create separation if you trust him to get the ball to him. And we know a guy that's going to trust his receiver is a guy like Josh Allen, who's going to be a gunslinger quarterback, the type of guy that Keon Coleman needs to be with. Think about, a guy like Martavis Bryant. He needed a gunslinger like Ben Roethlisberger. That's the type of quarterback that you need when you're a receiver of this, play style.
Yeah, no, I agree there as well. That'd be a lot of fun. I mean, getting potentially, I mean, Josh Allen has to be the new Ben Roethlisberger in the NFL, right? Like a better version of him.
Yeah, probably. I mean, at least from a mobility standpoint, he's a better version of him. But same type of archetype of quarterback for sure. Yeah. So, Detroit Lions are on the board here. Again, they have listed interior offensive line as their biggest need. You thought I was going to do it earlier. I am going to go to my University of Texas Longhorn here with Byron Murphy. They got to stop the run better, man. And they also need somebody to disrupt other than Aiden Hutchinson on their defensive line. And Byron Murphy, I watched a lot of his career, obviously, as a Texas fan. He is disruptive, man. He's physical. He's got power. He's got speed. He's a good player, man. I know Sweat won the Outland Trophy, but Murphy, in my opinion, was the guy that was the more disruptive pass rusher. And I think that's also what the Lions could use. So you need a guy that can stop the run. You need a guy that can go after the quarterback as a pass rusher. Other than Aiden Hutchinson, this is the guy that is going to do that for you up front. I think their secondary is bad. Like, I think they could use some, development and some players there, but they have young pieces on their secondary, like Melifonwu, and if Gardner Johnson and stuff are back on the secondary, they have upside there. I don't think you just need to throw a guy at their secondary to make it better. I think they just need to play better. I don't think they're bad players that they have in their secondary.
Yeah, I agree there. I will say they could use an extra corner, but like you said, they could also use a very good interior pass rusher. Realistically, Byron Murphy, from a pass rushing standpoint, think of like a Javon Hargrave, what he was able to do unleashed on that Philadelphia defense, unleashed on that Niners defense this past year. I think Byron Murphy could potentially have that same impact moving forward for this Detroit Lions defense paired next to Aiden Hutchinson. But back on the clock here with my team, Dallas Cowboys obviously cooped an extra third-round pick, moving down with the Ravens in that earlier deal. The reason why I made that move is I really do feel like they can go a number of directions with this pick. And whereas with a team like the Ravens, whereas a team with like the Cardinals, like they kind of knew they were taking an edge or a corner. Cowboys more so kind of leaning on either an offensive lineman or potentially a wide receiver here. Now, I'm in a bind here. Do I want to go with a guy like Lab McConkey? Do I want to go with a guy like Troy Franklin? Or do I want to go to the offensive line? I think you can go either direction, but I'm going to favor the offensive line here. Going to look at Troy Fatuanu from Washington, has inside-out versatility, can be your long-term Tyron Smith replacement. I think Tyron Smith will come back for 1 year, but long-term, once Tyron Smith moves on, you have to have a sufficient plan, whether that's having Fatuanu move to left guard with Tyler Smith kicking out, whether that's leaving Tyler Smith at left guard with Troy Fatuanu kicking out. Having that insurance plan is going to be key. So getting him here, 30th overall, I think that's a very sound pick. And the Cowboys just need to make sound picks at this point. They're right on that threshold of potentially making the NFC Championship, advancing in the playoffs. They don't need to be flashy here. They are really close, and adding to the offensive line, like we saw flare up during the season, would be very sound.
Yeah, and I'm actually going to do the exact same thing for the 49ers because I think everybody wants to go flashy with their pick. They're going to want to give him a wide receiver or something because, Juwan Jennings is a free agent. Brandon Ayuk is up for his deal. Maybe you could talk yourself into a Troy Franklin here. But Kyle Shanahan, he knows he can get the best out of his offensive personnel, I think. What he needs to invest in that he doesn't get the best out of all the time without the talent there is offensive line, defensive line, secondary, that kind of thing. So could go a number of different directions. You could go with a corner here, I think, as well. But I'm actually going to go with Jordan Morgan from Arizona as the tackle there on the board. Again, I don't know too much about Jordan Morgan, but I do know that I have heard people talk very highly about him. And I think outside of Trent Williams, man, who's also old as hell, you don't have a whole lot of like premier talent on your offensive line if you're the San Francisco 49ers. You got Colton McKivitz and a couple other guys there. They're just find a place for Morgan. He could be a long-term left tackle for you as well.
Yeah, I mean, Trent Williams is going to be 36 years old. Like, he's one of the oldest players in the league. So I really like the fit for the San Francisco 49ers, whether you're drafting Jordan Morgan to be the long-term Trent Williams replacement, maybe start him out on the right side, and then once Trent Williams retires, move him back to left, or whether it's to pair with Trent Williams, maybe you want to move him inside. But regardless, I really do love the fit here, reinforcing that offensive line for this San Francisco 49ers team. And we saw in the Super Bowl, we just saw on Sunday, Chris Jones was absolutely dominating down the stretch. That defensive line of the Chiefs, absolutely dominating down the stretch. You really need to ensure that spot if you want to ultimately win a Super Bowl. And I'm sorry for 49ers fans, but you made it to that dance 3 times. You haven't won one. I really think Shanahan knows the weakness at this point is to solidify that offensive line. So I like that pick there. And speaking of the Super Bowl, we head towards the champions. If you play fantasy, if you don't play fantasy, if you just watch that offense, you know where this pick's going to be. It's going to be to the wide receiver position. And I think the best fit on the board is Troy Franklin to take over that Marquez Valdes-Scantling role and give you a big plus at that spot. So overall review, I will zoom out so you guys can see the full board here. But basically, you guys can see first overall, Caleb Williams, Daniels, Marvin Harrison, Drake May, Rome Odunze flattening out the top 5. And I'll leave this on for a few seconds while we do the outro, but you guys can kind of see the landing spots and what happened.
Yeah, a lot of trades that we ended up making. Obviously, the J.J. McCarthy trade for the Vikings. We get the Drake May trade for the Falcons. We have the trade with the Bears moving down again for Dallas Turner. And a lot of trades in this mock. Cooper DeJean trade. We made a lot of moves, but this is kind of how the NFL draft works. When teams don't like the board, they move down. It's obviously trades mix up the draft order, and sometimes people don't like doing that. You just want to like get a realistic option for like if you stuck and picked, what kind of players are you looking at? But the NFL draft is pure chaos, and that's why we love it. It's why it's one of the most fun times of the year. I'm a little sad that my Buccaneers are not picking higher, even though we made the playoffs and we won a playoff game. It's like I actually thought this was going to be a year where I was going to be really invested in the draft and really invested in the prospects and maybe even the quarterbacks in the draft. But I mean, with Liam Cohen coming in, Baker Mayfield looks like he's coming back. It looks like we're going to try and keep Mike Evans and stuff too. So I'm excited about this Cooper DeJean fit. I think this is something that the Jason Light will be very aware of if he's available at our pick.
Yeah, and same thing with Troy Fautanu, really just establishing that offensive line for Dallas. We've seen in those big matchups that they've gotten bullied at the point of attack by guys like San Francisco, those big physical teams. So getting another offensive lineman to combat that, I'd be very excited as a Cowboys fan here. On top of that, also netting an extra third-round pick.
Yeah, for sure. And if you guys are a fan of a team and you didn't like what we did, just let us know down below in the comments. What didn't you like about it? What don't you like about the prospect? Is it the position that we addressed that you don't like? Is that not your biggest need? Whatever you thought we should have done with that pick, we are absolutely fine hearing out your criticisms. We are not draft experts. We study the fantasy prospects pretty much only for the NFL draft. We don't really focus too much on tackles and edge rushers and corners and that kind of thing. So if you disagreed with the pick, please let us know down below in the comments. Leave a like down below as well. If you did enjoy this video, subscribe if you're new around here. Of course, NFL mocks, you guys might not know who we are if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football specifically, but fantasy football in general, leave a subscription down below. Our draft guide will be coming out at some point this week. I had a tragedy in my family. My uncle passed away, sadly, of a heart attack, so might be a little delayed on the February 15th initial date that we talked about it. So please, just be patient with us. We'll get that out as soon as possible. But if you're interested in our draft guide, it is available on flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE for a 7-day free trial, 30% off any of the subscriptions, and 6 months for free, plus a free Zoom consultation with one of us for your Dynasty rosters or for whatever you want to talk about fantasy related if you sign up annually over there. So really appreciate that. We'll probably get a listener startup going on pretty soon, maybe in the next month, maybe 2 months or so. So keep posted for that. But I really appreciate all the support I've gotten for my uncle's passing. So really appreciate that. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.